Hello all, welcome to Biomed Bites. This channel is created to spread more educational videos on basics of biomedical engineering. Today's topic is on fingerprint technology in biometric systems. Let us move on to the first slide. This is the fingerprint anatomy. You can all see the fingerprint which are there on your palm surface as well as your fingers. You can see the fleshy regions over the endings of the fingers as well as at the tip of the fingers, and these are called as volar pads. Distinctive impressions which are left on the surfaces which are created by ridges and furrows are called as volar pads. The fingerprints commences their formation from 6th till 13th week of pregnancy or gestation, and these are based on some of the parameters like amniotic fluid, fetal size, intrauterine friction, and positioning of the baby within the womb. These are some of the samples for the fingerprint images. You can see different patterns in this, and we will be looking about each and everything in forthcoming slides. This is about the focal points on fingerprint. One is pattern area, second one is type lines, third is core, fourth is delta, and fifth one is crease line. Pattern area, which are the part of the volar pad which forms core, delta, ridges which are used for fingerprint classification. Type lines are two more innermost ridges that start parallel and diverge that surrounds the pattern area. That means it almost will be like a boundary. Core means you can see at the tip of this fingertip you can see a core which is the pattern which is all wounded up at a part. That is called core. Delta, obviously we will have a triangular pattern which will look like an outer terminus of a fingerprint pattern. Crease lines are the ridges, erasures which are caused by folding of skin, where you can see all the crease lines over here at the side of the palm. This slide is on injury scar. There are some superficial injuries such as cuts and bruises on the finger surface that alter the pattern in the damaged area of the finger or the palm temporarily. When it occurs temporary, which means that the ability of the basal layer over the epidermis is having the ability to regenerate the ridge surface. When it is becoming permanent, which means it's producing a scar, that means it is destructing itself as not to regenerate the basal layer to bring those ridge patterns again. In this slide, we'll be seeing about the use of fingerprints. Fingerprints are used as unique identifiers, which means the fingerprints are unique to yourself alone. It is not repeatable even to your heredity. The law enforcement agencies now routinely record fingerprints of criminals on 10 print cards, which means all the 10 fingers, the palm impression as well as the 10 fingertip impression will be taken. Two main purposes of the recorded fingerprints are: one is to identify repeated offenders who often use an alias to hide their identity. Second one is to perform background check for an employment or licensing. Another important application of considering the fingerprints in law enforcement is that it establishes the identity of a suspect or a criminal based on even partial fingerprints, which are called as latents. Over here I have given three different pictures. One is a rolled fingerprint where you keep it rolled, and second one is just plain fingerprint. Third one is latent, just a partial fingerprint where it has poor image quality and not much detail will be given in the latent when compared to rolled as well as plain. But rolled is completely the fingerprint is taken which consists of almost the whole of the fingertip. Plain has a detailed data and latent has partial data. Latents actually are not being considered as a clear fingerprint, but even then with just the latent print or the latents, we will be able to identify the criminals at the crime scene. Next slide is on automated fingerprint identification system, that is AFIS. This system was developed in 1970s to improve the efficiency and accuracy of the fingerprint matching. Currently, almost every law enforcement agency worldwide are using this AFIS to match the fingerprint. They just don't even record all the fingerprints, but they maintain 70 million data in their database. Next comes a 10 print card, where I have already told in the previous slide that all the 10 fingers fingerprint as well as the palm print will be taken as to make sure not to miss out any of the detail while confirming about a suspect. So when we see here in the diagram, there are 3 rows of diagram. First 2 rows are the individual fingers rolled impression, you can see, and in the third row it is a 10 print card where they have just kept all the 10 fingertips and it has been digitized. Next is fingerprint classification. Why is this classification necessary? Because just for 2 reasons. One is to reduce the search time, and second one is to much improve their computational complexity. The fingerprint database, which has about 70 million fingerprints in it, are all unique. Over here you can see onto the right side that there are fingerprint has ridges and furrows. The gray area are called as ridges and the white areas are called as furrow, which means a tractor just plows the land. It forms ridges and furrows, which means that it forms the mountain or the hill-like region are called as the ridges, and the cavity like the U shape which is formed, which are called as furrows. You can see crossover, core, bifurcation, which has been divided into 2, ridge ending, island, delta region, and spur. Next we start about the friction ridge characteristics, which is classified into 3 main levels. Level 1 is about general ridge flow and patterns. These are either feature based or image based. So feature based means it extracts implicit features which we call as Minish. And image based, it just captures the image without explicitly extracting any features. The next slide is on the fingerprint pattern types. There are 3 different fingerprint patterns which are existing, which are arch, loop, and volts. Fourth is the composites. I'll tell you what is it later in the forthcoming slides. Onto the right side, if you look into the diagrams, the first comes arch. You can see plain arch as well as tented arch. Plain arch looks like this, just a plain arch. Tented arch looks like this. The amplitude of the arch is higher in the tented arch. Next comes radial loop and ulnar loop. For someone who is watching this video without a biology background, let me tell you a few things. In a hand, this side is the radial bone which is present onto the thumb side, and the bone which is present onto the little finger is the ulnar bone. Okay, so some fingerprints which are towards the radial bone are called as radial loop, and the fingerprints which are facing towards the ulnar side are the ulnar loop. Next is plain vole. Plain vole are just spiral ones. They don't have much complexity in their structure. And the second one is the central pocket loop. Central pocket loop is pocketed in between a delta region. Fourth diagram, you can see it is double vole loop. That means you can see a core over here as well as here. So it is double wall. I hope you cannot see this accidental. It comes under the other slides where I can visibly show you what is an accidental fingerprint look like. Next we move on to the arch pattern, where we have no core, no delta, just the arch. Over here you can see that there are only arches and no core. You can see no delta over here. Those are just going by the flow. It is either plain or tinted. The ridge counting is not applicable over here, and the ridge tracing is also not applicable. Next comes the loop pattern. There will be one core and one delta in the loop pattern. As I said earlier, some fingerprint that faces the radial bone are the radial loop, which faces the ulnar bone or the ulnar loop. It has one core and one delta. Next is wall pattern. There are two patterns in the wall, which are plane and spiral. You can look into the first three pictures which are stated below the slide, that there are two deltas and one plain wall or one core. In the second, you can see there are two deltas and one core which is oval in shape. The third one, you can see that there are two delta and you can see spiral wall, which means that it is getting coiled to one particular point. It is not spiral. It is not a plain wall. It is spiral. Next comes the composite pattern, which means it is called a central pocket loop, which means it is we cannot state how many number of deltas will be existing over here. Double loops will have either lateral pocket or twinned loops, which means two loops will be present in one single fingerprint and one lateral pocket will also be present. Accidentals. This is a pattern which is comprising of two different types of patterns, such as loop or wall, or any two combination of two different loops in a single fingerprint. So this is called as accidental, which is shown at the right side. Central pocket loop or wall. You can see that there is one core and two delta. There are no recurving ridges with the pattern areas where it is touched or crossing by an imaginary line. I have drawn an imaginary line that connects two delta. A pattern possesses two deltas with core or more ridges forming a complete circuit, which may be oval, spiral, circular, or any variant of a circle. Next is twinned loop. Twinned loop always will have loops like this. So either one will be facing towards the other direction and the other will be facing towards the other direction. So twinned loops. There will be two cores and two deltas. And these patterns are so named because they have two distinct loops, one surrounding or overlapping the other. Next is lateral pocket loop. This will also have two cores and two deltas, but the only difference between the other twinned loop is that this pattern, in which ridges have the appearance of being two loops, which are one is surrounding or overlapping the other, with the ridges about the core of each loop terminating on the same side of the delta. I hope this is clear. In the diagram you can see the ridges about the core, which is overlapping to each other, is terminating on the same side of the delta, which is present onto the right side. I hope this is clear. Next is level 2. Level 2 is about Minish or Galton's disease. The ridge characteristics are unique details in a fingerprint structure. The fingerprint identification involves pattern matching and assessing of these minutiae. Minutiae are the features which are being extracted from a fingerprint for a reference print. These are taken with an inked impression or a digital fingerprint image. There are some parameters which will work for identifying the features like Minish. One is bifurcation, trifurcation where it divides into three, convergence. Let me draw. Bifurcation is this. It is divided into three. Trifurcation is, it is being divided into three. Bifurcation is divided into two. Convergence is two coming into one single line, which is convergence. Short ridge is given over here. You can see this is short ridge. Enclosure, this is called as enclosure. It is getting enclosed. Next one is ridge dot. If something is over here, this is called as ridge dot. This is the ridge ending. This is the hook. If something comes like this, this is hook. Spur is just like this. Like everything is moving on to one direction, spur goes on to the opposite direction. It is called spur. Next is ridge break. Over here you can see the ridge break. Specialty means it has a special feature which is out of all these classification. Crossover or bridging, which means it ends over here and it continues from here, it goes till here. And this is called as a crossover or a bridge, or it is called as an interference. Next is level 3. Level 3 is all about poroscope or edgeoscopy. The distribution attributes. Attributes are otherwise called as parameters. The distribution parameters of individual ridge units like the shape, width and edge contours are being studied in the poroscopy. The placement, structural and distributional attributes of the pores are also dealt about in the poroscopy. If you see that there is a comparison of sweat pores which are identified and marked as numbers, which is very tiring when we do it manually, and I'm not sure if it would be correct if we do something manually. So this method was discovered and developed in 1912 by Edmund Locard. Even now there are more machine learning algorithms which can do it in a very few fraction of seconds. Level 3 features which are observed in a latent and its method rolled fingerprint. Now the latent fingerprint, as we discussed earlier, is just a thumb, a partial fingerprint which will not have much detail in it. The matted rolled fingerprint is seen as B. Over here this is latent, this is rolled. In a rolled fingerprint you can see distinctive structures, while in latent, which is not a partial, as well as it is smudged. It is not, you cannot count the pores even using a highly designed machine learning algorithm in it. The ridge flow on the boundary of a finger runs parallel to the fingernail furrow and in the finger crease. Fingernail furrow and in the finger crease, which has the boundary, which has the ridge flow even to the other side of the finger. The ridge flow pattern in the central area is also termed as pattern area of the finger and is governed by some parameters like shape, size and placement of volar pads. Higher and symmetric volar pads which tends to generate voles. Flatter and symmetric volar pads tend to generate arches, and asymmetric volar pads tend to generate loops. So these are the friction ridge patterns which are not just influenced by the genetic factors but also by some random factors like physical stresses, tension during a fetal development. Additional features like the creases, cuts and scars have also been dealt in earlier slides of this presentation. While these features are not inherent to the fingerprint formation, they may become permanent depending on the severity of the cuts and scars. If it is a first or second degree cut, as I said earlier, there will be a basal layer epidermis regeneration that will happen, and it brings back all the ridges that has been damaged or obliterated. Once it is a third degree cut or a burn, it produces scar which will not have the ability to regenerate the ridge structures or the furrow structures. So these features are not as universal as the 3 levels of features discussed earlier. Their utility in the fingerprint matching is more and more limited. With this class is getting over. If you have any doubts, leave a comment below. Thank you.